Hey everybody, thanks a lot for being here for the success training, another edition with Mr. Dwayne Fleece. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
Well, today we're going to talk about something that kind of is really important to me, and in some ways it's very basic, in some ways very poorly trained in the world. And let's talk a little bit about this content that's going to come from my book, Parent Action Plan Fear, with which I wrote with Ryan Shade, MCSW, who's a social worker and one of my mentors in my psychotherapy practice. So I asked him to help with this because fear and anxiety is something that all of us are going to feel. And in a lot of ways, it's normal. But as parents, we want to be able to handle it really well. When our kids are fearful, when our kids are anxious, know how far to push them, know when to listen to them, and so on. So I think it's very confusing for parents, when their kids are on a fit, or when their kids worried about doing something, or when their kids having a problem. It's kind of hard as parents to know what to do. And the good news is today you're going to hear it. Thoughts on that, sir? Have you had some times where your kids were anxious or fearful and it was a challenge?
Yes, sir. Any of the students that happens from time to time, depending on what we're doing, even ones that have been with us for a while, but depending on what comes up, they're afraid, and we have to work through it with them.
Yeah, and it's not that I think that things we do in our martial arts program are inherently they're not dangerous, they're very safe. And I don't think very frequently that they're afraid of something martial arts related, like fighting related. But it might be afraid of something where they don't feel like they won't talk loud because they're afraid, they're anxious about something like that, or they don't think they can do something. It looks like it's hard, so they don't think they can do it. And kind of deconstructing that's important. I know with my son, outside of martial arts, like he was afraid of fireworks when he was 2 years old. So I took him to my favorite football team, Arizona State University. We went to the football game, fireworks go off, and he just was freaking out. And I really didn't know what to do. Do I you know, get them to tough it out and go, "Hey, man, quit being a baby." That I didn't wouldn't have done that, but I think I see parents saying things like that, and we're going to go through some examples of like what doesn't work and what does work so that we can help. But I wish I had this knowledge before I took them to the football game.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to talk about all these things. Let's start with. Oops. We're gonna talk about all these things. I guess I was gonna click through one at a time, but it didn't work that way. So that's what you get. You get to kind of have a preview. So fear and anxiety, is it normal or is it isn't? Or is it not normal? And fear is normal. We want to have fear because it's a kind of a guidepost to whether something may be dangerous or something may be a bad idea to do. Or sometimes we have fear because we're unsure or it's an unknown, and unknowns are dangerous. But that doesn't mean that that fear um, it's sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. And one of the differences is that if fear or anxiety is out of proportion, we're going to talk about the difference between fear and anxiety, but if it's out of proportion to what's going on at the moment, like for example, maybe you can think of one, but the example is somebody afraid to leave their house. Well, that's a real fear. They're agoraphobic. They're real fear, but is it reasonable? Is it out of proportion to what is helpful for them? And the answer is yes, that fear is not doing its job. If the house was burning and they weren't leaving the house, that would be even worse. But let's flip it around. If the house is burning, and I'm afraid of getting burned, that's a good fear. That did its job. The fear was functional because I ought to be afraid of getting, my house burned down. So I ought to, use that to generate some energy to leave. So that's fear. So what's the difference between fear and anxiety? So fear is the emotional response to a threat. So fire, house on fire, fear, I'm out of there. Anxiety is the emotional response to the expectation of a threat. So if I'm sitting in my house and I'm worried about the fire, if I'm worried about it because maybe I heard some noises outside that sounded like crackling fire, but there's no evidence of a fire. That's anxiety. Now, anxiety works too, because if you do hear noises outside or you hear some sounds or indications of something that might be dangerous, that's doing its job. That's what anxiety is for. But what we tend to have is fears that are bigger than what needs to be the case, and anxieties that sometimes are much bigger. This is the one that's more common, is anxiety much bigger than needs to be the case, because we have to determine our interpretation, our expectation of a threat. So if our expectation, or what we think is happening, what we're imagining is happening, is more than what the emotion we need to have produced for us to be functional, then that's, you can imagine, it's easier to have your anxiety out of whack than your fear. Anxiety, because I'm imagining or determining what might be happening, versus fear, which is something that really is happening. So, you have any thoughts on that, sir, or the comments between the two?
Uh, no, other than, no, not really. I think that's fine.
I stuck you with that. I'm trying to fix my slide here while we're doing this, and I'll get that fixed. But so fear and anxiety are two different things, and it doesn't mean that either are wrong. That's what's really important to understand. It doesn't mean that one of them's good or one of them's bad, or or either are bad in and of themselves. What the problem is when we have more of it than is giving us some value. Like, if we're trying to leave the house, then yeah, fear, it's a good thing. But if we're afraid and we can't go to sleep every night because we're worried about a fire, that would be an anxiety that isn't functional. That's not doing something good for us. So that's what the
Yes.
difference is. Fear is the emotional response to a threat, and anxiety is the emotional response to the expectation of a threat. So, two very, very different things. Okay, now I fixed my PowerPoint here. And so, when is it a problem? When do we have problems? Well, there's a couple problems. One is what we've already mentioned, which is if it's out of proportion to what's really going on, then it can hold us back from taking action that we ought to be taken, or would be good for us to take, would be in our best interest to take. So, if some of you might have had the experience your first day dropping your kid off, that your kid didn't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. And they put up a fuss. I don't know if that happened to you. Totally didn't happen to me. My son, I took it to school the first day and he kicked me out. He said, "Hey, get out of here, Dad." I mean, and I was the one that was depressed, and oh, I was sad to leave you. But a lot of parents have the opposite effect, where they want to drop their kids off at school and they're afraid. But we know that fear, that anxiety, it's anxiety, not fear. That anxiety is out of proportion of what's really going on. It's totally real. It's a new thing. There's new people. There's all kinds of people. There's all kinds of different environment. It makes sense that they'd have some anxiety. So what do we do about it? We got to recognize that it's out of proportion. So it's out of proportion of what's really going on. And there could be a lot of these. In my book, I talked about some examples. And the one example, and I wrote them all around the the idea. Let's say your kid was anxious about going on a roller coaster. So we know that a roller coaster is safe, and it's really easy for us to think, oh, hey, you're going to have fun, just get on the roller coaster. You're being silly, you just get on the roller coaster. I wrote some examples of different things that I've heard parents say. Hey, let's go. This would be a dad telling a mom, hey, let's go. Johnny's afraid and we don't want to push him. That'd be one example. Another family might be saying, hey, you got to go. It's going to be fun. The third family might be saying, hey, you're going anyway. Stop crying. And the fourth family, hey, you always cry. Be a big girl. And the fifth family, maybe they just ignore the kid and don't even listen to him. He throws a fit and they ignore him. And for some of you, and probably for all of us, we've done those. We've kind of yelled at the kid. We've tried to motivate him by saying, hey, it's not going to be a problem. We've kind of, in a way, shamed them, maybe saying, hey, your sister's okay with it. Your little sister's not afraid. That's kind of a shaming activity. It doesn't mean we mean bad. It just means we haven't gotten what we're going to do today, the training and what to do. Can you think of any that you've heard people say?
Oh, those were all the ones that I've heard or probably said a few times myself to my own kids.
Sure. And first, look, we don't want to judge any parent that's done this. I've said those things. You said those things. I mean, we don't because we don't have the tools in our toolbox. They don't give us a manual to how to deal with these little munchkins that we create. You know, they don't give us instructions on this. And the problem is it turns into maladaptive beliefs. So if all we do is one of these things, let me explain what those mean. Maladaptive thoughts and beliefs are things that we learn that don't work. They're maladaptive, they don't work. And they can turn into core beliefs that when we're older turn into things like people don't care about me, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not loved. So let me kind of give you an example of what that would look like. And again, parents listening, do not judge yourselves if you said this. Saying one of these things one or two times is not, determining the rest of your kid's life. But we want to understand what the effect could be if it happens a lot or if other people say it. So let's use the first one. Let's go. Johnny's afraid and we don't want to push him. So maybe that seems like it'd be supportive. I'm saying, oh, we don't want to push him. But what your child may begin to believe is that I'm not good enough or I'm not capable. I'm defective. They may think that they get one of the main core beliefs that are I'm not good enough. There's five core beliefs, by the way. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm insignificant or unimportant. I'm unsafe or I can't keep myself safe, or I'm defective. So those are five. And almost everything that kind of breaks our adaptive beliefs or turns into maladaptive beliefs are one of those five. So let's go. Johnny's afraid. We don't want to push him. It seems caring and loving, and it is, but it may create a belief that they're not good enough or not capable. The other one here, hey, it's going to be fun. Thinking you're going to motivate the kid. They may feel like my feelings aren't important and that they're insignificant or unimportant. So they were crying and it's scary. There's all these noises. People are screaming at the roller coaster, but you're saying, hey, it's going to be fun. I, you know, it's incongruent with what's happening. So they may feel like they're insignificant or unimportant. You're going anyway. Stop crying. Well, then they might feel one of the ones like I'm unsafe or I can't keep myself safe. You always cry, be a big girl. That might be turn into I'm not worthy of love or I'm not capable. Or the kid's just ignored and they just let them yell and they bring them anyway. And that one can turn into I'm not worthy. I'm not worth you listening to. I'm not worth it. Now, look, I want to emphasize I am not saying that if you say these, you're a horrible parent, or that we don't want to push them through these times. In fact, that's what we're going to do next. But there's two parts to it. So we're going to tell you the secret two parts that'll help you with this. So how do we turn this into growth? Anything to add there, sir? I mean to talk over you there.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, we want to think about these maladaptive beliefs as something that they learn in childhood, usually when we're 5 to 10 years old. All of us learn it. And the reason it's around that age is before 5, when we have experiences, we can't store them away verbally and in the same way as when we've learned some language skills, much a more fluent language, and when we have better brain processing. So before 5, some of these things don't turn into like cemented beliefs and maladaptive beliefs. For 5 to 10, the reason well, after 10, let's say, after 10, these beliefs or these experiences that happen may be easier to mentally process. In other words, the example I use is kid's going to steal a cookie from the cookie jar. Well, if they're, before 5, the yelling happens, they can't really process it. It doesn't feel like much. They just don't do it. From after 10, you're going to steal a cookie from the cookie jar. If you remember yourself at 11, you knew, okay, yeah, I wasn't supposed to do that. I knew that was not the right thing. I'm not going to feel like I wasn't loved. But in that 5 to 10 year old range, you wanted a cookie and nobody and they yelled at you for it. So that's how they can get misinterpreted. Again, we're not saying to be weak with your kids. In fact, we want you to be stronger with your kids, but you got to do it in the way that we're going to talk about. So chip in anytime you want, sir. I'm sorry. I'm going through a lot of the stuff in the book. I want to get through it. And
Yes,
you
sir.
and so how do we turn this into growth? It's a two-step process. And the first part is called validation. Validation is different from listening. Validation means that I understand you and you know that I understand you. So it doesn't sound like this. Um, the kid's crying at the roller coaster are really upset, and we say, I hear you, we're going anyway. So that doesn't mean they got understood, that what they said was heard. And I hear this a lot with couples that I work with, where one person will say something and the other person says, oh, I hear what you're saying. And then they tell them their rebuttal. Now, if I asked the I hear what you're saying got person, and maybe you and I have experienced this, the one that says, oh, I hear what you're saying, they could probably verbatim say exactly what the other person is saying. So they heard them. But what needs to happen is that the other person needs to know that they were fully understood. So it might be something like, hey, I'm upset because you didn't take the trash out. Okay, so you're upset because I didn't take the trash out. And it may be in the form of repeating it or paraphrasing it or some communication that the other person understands. So validation is different from listening. It means they understand that you understood. So it's
Yes,
a
sir.
two-part thing.
Right. It's kind of like more validating what the feeling was behind their statement or their comment.
Yes, and fully understanding it so they know that you know that they're scared. They
Right.
know that you know that you're scared. I mean, obviously, I know they're scared because kids screaming, "Hey, I know
Right.
you're scared." Well, that's not quite thorough enough. So, and if you don't validate, then you don't always get the whole story. That's the other part. So that I might say really thoroughly, "Hey, I'm mad because you didn't take out the trash." And you say, well, okay, so you're upset because I didn't take the trash out. I'm like, well, yeah, it's because now I have to do it. Now you're making me do it. There's more to the story. And that's like a stupid example in a way, but maybe there's more to the story. Maybe the kid's upset and anxious because there were really loud noises or people are screaming. And maybe the kid's upset because he saw it going too fast or she saw it going too fast. Or maybe it's just because it's a weird situation, and they don't know what to do and they don't want to be bundled up. They see everybody kind of tightened up into the harness for the roller coaster or the thing that they put in for the roller coaster. So you don't really know. Kids especially don't have a lot of language skills and they're not good at saying what they're specifically afraid of or the noises that may so validating helps us then to thoroughly understand. We might say something like, oh, so is it, or the noises, I hear it's scary. What part of it is really scary for you? Oh, the noises. I think people are really upset. They're getting hurt. Oh, I see. So you think that the screaming and everything is because kids are getting hurt. Yeah. Okay, I can do something with that now. There's some
Yeah.
there. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. And I don't know, if not making a list of things that it could be, like putting other ideas in their head. I
Right,
don't know that that is as helpful as what people think it is. So
right, right.
if you're going to ask them, what is it that bothers you about it, let them answer it the way they can, rather than saying, oh, are you afraid of this part or this part? Because now we just added extra things maybe they didn't think about.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And you may have to prompt them or help them a little or guide them into, okay, is it something you see? I mean, or something general. But if you give them a big list of things that could be scary, yeah, just like you said, maybe they're going to be more scary, or you'll think that they're scared because of the noise, but they're really scared because of whatever. Or they might be
Right.
scared of something that you didn't even recognize. So we have to find out. And one of the things that's really important here, my psychotherapy mentor talks about holding on to yourself, and that sounds a little bit um, hard to understand sometimes. Holding on to yourself, and what the way we talk about this in our school is for our instructors is the emotions that I express need to be the emotions they need, not what I feel. So as a parent, I'm a leader. I might be totally irritated and mad. Maybe we were at the amusement park all day long and it's the end of the day and now my kid's causing a fit and he's been, complaining about the food he got or whatever. And there's all this stuff going on. I might be irritated or upset about a lot of things. But at that moment, as a parent, we're leaders. And as leaders, we've got to give them the emotions they need, not what we feel. And then we get the best outcomes. I want us as parents to have the best outcomes. This is not to be coddling the kid in any way. It's to push them further. And we're going to see that in a second. But the emotions that we express are the emotions they need, not what they feel. So if they did something funny, it may not be time to laugh because we got to control the situation. And we see that in our martial arts school all the time. A kid falls down and giggles, and the instructor might laugh, and what happens? Other kids are going to giggle, and they're going to continue a bad behavior. Where we were trying to get them all to be standing up and listening to what's going on, so we have to use the emotions that they need, even though I think it might be hilarious. So there's an example there. Okay, so how to validate your child? What does it look like? And it might look something like this. And I wrote this, and you can get the book. We have this at low cost on Amazon, so you can review more in more depth this material. But here's a little example. So it might look like the kids complaining, and the mom might say, "Yes, I get it. Roller coasters can be scary. Yes, mom, I want to leave. What's the scariest part, Olivia?" Just like you said, it wasn't specific. The loud noise and all the crashing, they go upside down. What if we fall? Mom would say, I completely get that. It is noisy and loud. We don't normally go upside down either. That what's scary? And the kid says, yes, can we leave? Now, we might be thinking, well, then we have to comply with the kid and leave, but that's not at all what we're going to do. The second part is to teach them to push themselves. So now the child felt like we understood where they're coming from. We understood that they were scared. We understood why they were scared, and they knew that we weren't ignoring them. We're including them in the process, but we have to teach them to push themselves, and that means that it's not you being a dictator and you being a mean parent. It's teaching them that they need to learn to push themselves, not you pushing them. There's a difference between those two things. If they become adults and you were the only one that pushed them and you pushed them a lot, well, when they're adults, they're not going to want to do anything. They're not, they had to have you to push them to get any results. What we need them to learn is when things become scary, they can evaluate it and then they can push themselves anyway because it's going to have a good outcome. So it may look something more like this. There's a bunch of stuff in here that we can talk about. They're going to typically need to be taught to push themselves when they're on edges of growth, when there's times where they are caught up to their limit of ability or caught up to their limit of understanding. And these are the times that they need to learn to get through so that they can learn to get through other ones when you're not there. So it might look like this, where mom says, yes, I get it. Roller coasters can be scary. Yeah, mom, I want to leave. What's the scariest part, Olivia? The loud noises and all the crashing. They go upside down. And what if we fall? I completely get that. It is noisy and loud. We don't normally go upside down either. Is that what's scary? Yes. Can we leave? Then teaching them to push themselves might be, I'm wondering, Olivia, will the loud noises hurt you? Well, no. Well, guess what? You didn't know this, but those screams are actually people having fun. People make a lot of noise when things are extra fun and exciting. Remember when you were making a lot of noise at karate when you were kicking the pads and having fun? Yeah, I remember. It's like that, but also even more fun because it's new. So I want to see how you like it when we write it. And they may still be anxious, but now they're learning what the process is the fear that they had may not be what they thought it was, if that can be identified. And then we let them know that that's our expectation that we are going to go through it. We're gonna go ride the roller coaster. We're gonna do the thing. So the key parts are the fear was talked about. We suggested different thoughts for each fear so they can learn better self-talk. Oh, things are noisy. Is that always scary? My kid was afraid of fireworks. Is it always forever going to be scary? Is that actually injuring you? No, it's not injuring you. Now, he may still have been scared. We might, still have had him really worry about the fireworks, but he's starting to get some thought processes that we're injecting in his brain so that he learns. And then the last is that we let them know what's going to happen. this is what's going to happen. We're going to go on the roller coaster, and I'm sure it's going to be good, but you're going to have to see what you think after we ride it. So we're making the decision for them, not the child. And I believe this can be transformative. It's transformative that you learn to let your kid know that it's your job to make the decision. You're still understanding how they feel, but we're gonna make the decision. I'm making the decision that's best for you. And you really have two choices. I wrote this in the book. Choice one, you can do what they want. You can stop, you can yell at them, you can fight, you can do what they want, and you can not follow this strategy, or you can teach them to push themselves. This doesn't mean pushing them. It's a little different. We're not going to just yell at them, tough it out, grow up. We're going to do it anyway. Again, that's not helpful. And if for most of us, that didn't work, or it got our kid to comply. And compliance isn't the same as teaching them to push themselves. Anything to add there, sir?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we get them to comply, just like with adults too, when you comply, sometimes you comply, but there's an element of resentment in there with their compliance, which isn't going to help for the next time because they they weren't heard, and then I was forced to do something I didn't want to do anyway, and it has a negative effect.
Well, and I think with kids, that resentment, what you feel is resentment when you get kind of told off and told what to do. With kids, it turns into these maladaptive beliefs. We want them to learn that they're strong, and then when stuff happens, they can still do it. And that scary thing is always going to happen. When I learned to do stand-up comedy, and that was I was always scared when I went out on the stage, even though I'm a speaker in public all the time. When I went and did stand-up comedy, that was super scary, but I still did it because my dad must have been good at kind of teaching me to push myself. So I didn't need him there to tell me it was okay. That's what we want. So your kids in the end don't need you there at all to push themselves through something. And the last thing I was going to mention is this ends up building discipline. And what we mean by that is the word discipline comes from the Latin root discipulus, which means pupil or student. So discipline is something that you have to be a student of. Us as parents are teaching our kids discipline. That means teaching them to push themselves when things are hard so that later they become self-disciplined. So our definition of discipline in our schools is learning to push myself even when it's hard. So learning to push myself even when it's hard. So that later they learn self-discipline, but before they can learn self-discipline, we've got to teach them that. And so the definition is self-discipline is learning to push myself even when it's hard. Our parents' job is teaching them to learn that. So hopefully that made some sense. We kind of went around about a bunch of different things, and this was a topic that was important, so we didn't spend a lot of time organizing it. We wanted to get to talk about this today. Anything to add, sir, to wrap up?
Yeah, a lot of times with discipline too, that it takes away a lot of fear for kids because they have some expectations of what's going to happen. They've done it before, and this one new thing is easier to deal with because I've I've done it before. I know how to do these other things before it, so it
I think
gives a little safety.
Yeah, and that builds the other piece that we really get a lot of parents wanting for their kids is confidence. So if I know that I've gotten through hard things before, if I know that I've gotten to that edge of growth, and where you might hear this as a parent is, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go. I don't feel like doing it. I don't want to, that's really too hard. Or they're afraid of something. So those all are really anxieties. So I don't want to do it. If you know it's something good for them, it'd be like school. If they're in second grade and they say, I don't want to go to school anymore, I'm done. Well, you know,
Yeah,
it's okay to validate. That's good, and then let them know that it's not an option. You got to go to school. This is something that you need to do to learn to be a successful and valuable adult. And that's my job as a parent to make sure you go. Same for karate. Karate is something that you parents start with your kids so that they learn these skills, confidence and discipline, and the other skills and safety for them. So those are important things. A lot of times they'll have fear and anxiety before, doing it with us for some of our students do it for 10, 15 years. Some for 3 or 4 years would probably be the least. But that's if they don't feel like coming one day, that's their fear and anxiety coming up, and teaching them to push themselves is a step towards teaching them to push themselves in everything else they do when you're not around, which is our job. That's
Sir.
it. That's all I had to say. Thanks a lot for being here, sir. Anything else to
Yes,
wrap
sir.
up?
No, I think this is perfect. It's timely for me. I just had some new students start and they're little guys, a little timid, so we
Uh-huh.
can work with some of those things out of the book.
Yeah, and if parents start realizing that's a goal, that's what our job is. But we don't get those instructions when the kids come out. If the kids came
Right.
out, instructional manual come out, then I believe on the instruction manual it'd say, your goals are to teach them to push themselves, to teach them stuff, and including that. And that those would be some of our goals. But hopefully we gave you the tools today so that you know how to do it in a way that's productive for you and you get the outcomes you want as well. All right, thanks a lot, sir. And thanks everybody for being online and being part of our event here and our podcast.